People noticed something eerie in the river. It looked like something was moving in there. This curious fellow, Ado, picked up a soda can and tossed it into the water. In an instant, some unknown creature slurped it down. The onlookers became excited, speculating that it was a dolphin playing with them. Consequently, they all began throwing their food and drinks into the river. Little did they know that this curiosity would soon cost them their lives. The next moment, Ado stared into the distance, completely stunned. A massive creature, resembling both a fish and a lizard, charged towards the crowd. Upon witnessing this sight, people frantically tried to escape. Those who couldn't get away in time were flung dozens of feet into the air. Then the monster stormed into the crowded square, its eyes turning red at the sight of so many potential prey. Meanwhile, a young woman sat on the grass, engrossed in listening to her cousin talk about a movie, completely unaware of the approaching danger. By the time she realized what was happening, it was already too late. In an instant, the entire square descended into chaos, filled with terror and screams of agony. A group of people desperately scrambled into some container shack, leaving one woman trapped outside. Just as the monster lunged at her, the woman jumped down a set of stairs, saving her life. However, inside the container shack, a gruesome scene unfolded. The monster blocked the only exit, ruthlessly preying on those trapped within. The other door was tightly secured with a chain, and the people inside desperately cried out through the narrow gap. Suddenly, the woman realized her son was still inside. Heartbroken and frantic, she pleaded with Adu for help. Together, Adu and a foreign friend managed to pull the chain open, rescuing the remaining survivors inside. Without hesitation, the foreign friend ripped up a paving stone and hurled it at the monster, but it had no effect. So, with Adu's assistance, they lifted a heavy stone block and slammed it down on the creature. Feeling provoked, the monster turned and charged directly at. Quick thinking, Adu dove under a car. The foreign friend wasn't so fortunate and was pinned under the monster's foot in grave danger. Driven by the need to save his friend, Adu mustered all his strength, lifted the stone block once more, and smashed it down, this time striking the monster's tail. The creature roared in pain and began relentlessly chasing Adu. While running, Adu grabbed his daughter's hand, trying to flee the scene. In the tense chaos, they stumbled and fell. After getting back on their feet, Adu, still disoriented, continued running while holding a child's hand. He looked back and realized to his horror that he was holding the hand of someone else's daughter. Adu was utterly dumbfounded. In that tragic moment, he could only watch helplessly as the monster snatched his own daughter. The monster then leaped into the Han River. His daughter clutched in its grasp and swam towards the opposite bank. It slowly submerged beneath the water, vanishing without a trace, leaving Adu's father to watch in despair, unable to do anything. While Adu was still consumed by the grief of losing his daughter, Juan-shu, they received urgent news to evacuate immediately. Subsequently, the South Korean military took control of the area, establishing a restricted zone around the Han River. That evening, all the families who had lost loved ones gathered to mourn, gazing at the photograph of the missing and presumed dead Juan-shu. Her uncle, aunt, and grandfather were inconsolable. The situation continued to escalate rapidly. Anyone who had been present at the riverbank during the incident was ordered into centralized quarantine. It turned out that the monster attack was not simply a matter of casualties. Earlier that day, the American military officer who had helped Adu rescue people had been injured during the fight with the creature and had become infected with some unknown and terrifying virus. Consequently, Adu and his family were all quarantined. Late that night, Adu was so hungry he couldn't sleep. He stealthily found a can of food and began to eat. Suddenly, his phone vibrated. Adu answered, and amidst the static, he could make out his daughter Xuanshu's voice. She told him her phone was about to die and that she was trapped in a large, deep sewer. Adu frantically asked for her exact location, but then the line went silent. Hearing that his daughter was alive filled Adu with overwhelming emotion. He immediately called the police, hoping for their assistance. However, the police officer who answered was dismissive, accusing Adu of fabricating the story. Adding insult to injury, Adu's uncle suggested to the police that they could try to locate her using her call records, but they refused. After their pleas for help went unanswered, they decided to leave the quarantine and search for and rescue Xuanshu themselves. But their escape attempt was almost immediately thwarted when Adu's bright yellow hair made them easily recognizable. Spotted, they quickly made their getaway, jumping into a car that was waiting for them. Adu's father, old Mr. Park, used all his savings to buy rescue equipment and 3 real handguns on the black market. Soon, the faces of the 4 family members were plastered online as wanted fugitives. Despite this, nothing could deter them from their mission to save their loved one. Through skillful acting, they disguised themselves as disinfection workers and successfully passed through a checkpoint. Following Xuanshu's vague description of a very tall and deep sewer, the family began a systematic search of every possible location. Days turned into weeks, with no success and no return to the city. Exhausted, cold, and hungry, they decided to return to their old convenience store to get some food and rest before continuing their search for Xuanshu. They started to imagine the happy times they had shared with Xuanshu, picturing themselves feeding her, a close-knit and loving family. The scene shifted to Xuanshu, and the contrast was stark. In the dark, damp, cold, and hunger-filled environment, surrounded by lifeless bodies, Xuanshu imagined how wonderful it would be to be with her family. Suddenly, she heard the sound of the monster returning to its lair. She quickly pretended to be dead, lying motionless on the ground. Fortunately, the monster didn't notice her, dropped its freshly caught prey, and left the lair again. Miraculously, a small boy had survived the attack. As Xuanshu went to check on the boy's injuries, the prey stirred, and the monster turned back. Quickly, Xuanshu hugged the boy tightly and lay still on the ground. Would she be able to deceive the monster this time? A man noticed something peculiar. Peeking through a crack, he saw a monster looking directly at him with what seemed like disdain. Old Mr. Park cautiously picked up his hunting rifle, aiming at the monster through the narrow opening. With a loud bang, the shot rang out, and the monster went into a frenzy, charging towards them. Enraged, the monster thrashed violently, overturning overturning the small convenience store owned by Mr. Park's family. Seizing the opportunity, Mr. Park fired another shot, hitting and repelling the monster. When Mr. Park and his family crawled out of the wreckage, they saw the monster lying still nearby. The second son, Nam-il, immediately fired a shot at the creature. Unexpectedly, the monster got up and fled, revealing its cunning deception. It had merely been playing dead. The family began to relentlessly pursue the monster, determined to avenge Xuanshu. The gunshots attracted the attention of patrolling guards, who started chasing after them. Taking advantage of the distraction, the monster dove into the water. Watching the dark shape gradually approach them, Mr. Park told his children to run, deciding to confront the monster himself. He took the hunting rifle from Adu, which had only one bullet left. He resolutely prepared to face the monster in a final showdown. But as the monster lunged out of the water, Mr. Park pulled the trigger, only to hear a click. The rifle was empty. Adu had mistakenly miscounted the bullets, having fired 4 shots but only accounting for 3. Accepting his fate, Mr. Park waved his children away, entrusting them with the responsibility of finding their granddaughter. Then the monster slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. His children watched in horror as the monster grabbed their father again, violently threw him down the riverbank, and then disappeared into the Han River. Devastated by the death of his father, which he felt was his fault, Adu urged his younger brother and sister to leave and continue searching for Xuanshu as the patrolling guards were closing in. He picked up a newspaper and covered his father's face, wanting to leave but unable to bear the thought of abandoning him. Ultimately, Adu was apprehended and taken back. Nam-il and Namju became separated during their escape. Nam-il thought of his college classmate, who worked at a telecommunications company. He hoped his friend could help locate Xuanshu's phone signal. His classmate agreed to assist, and they stealthily infiltrated the company building under the cover of darkness. However, accessing the location data required the team leader's authorization password, so the classmate went to the team leader's office, only to find that the police had already set up an ambush. It turned out that the classmate had betrayed Nam-il for the reward money. Growing suspicious after his friend had been gone for a long time, Nam-il noticed a password keychain nearby. He decided to try his luck. To his surprise, he successfully gained access and found Xuanshu's location. Before Nam-il could celebrate, he was surrounded by police officers. Remaining calm, Nam-il first double-checked Xuanshu's coordinates and then cleverly created a short circuit. The office plunged into darkness due to the power outage. Seizing the opportunity, Nam-il quietly slipped out of the building while the police were trapped inside. Before he left, his classmate surprisingly gave him a thumbs up, indicating that he had ultimately followed his conscience and helped Nam-il escape the police pursuit. After fleeing the building, Nam-il found himself trapped between police cars approaching from both directions. He took a risky leap off a bridge, finally evading the police. Despite his injuries, he managed to send Xuanshu's location to his brother and sister before losing consciousness. Meanwhile, after getting separated from Nam-il, Namju spent the night safely under a bridge. She then evaded the numerous patrolling officers and stopped at a small convenience store to replenish her supplies and charge her turned-off phone. It was there that she finally received Xuanshu's location. She immediately set off to rescue her niece, being the first to reach the designated area. After a long journey, Namju arrived at the original bridge. Shortly after approaching it, she unexpectedly encountered the monster. Just as she was about to draw her bow and arrow, the incredibly fast creature knocked her over, causing her to fall into a narrow, deep pit nearby. Fortunately for her, the pit was too small for the large monster to reach her. Knocked unconscious, Namju narrowly escaped the monster's grasp. On the other side, Adu also learned of Xuanshu's location. However, when he tried to explain this to the doctors at the quarantine facility, they completely dismissed him, claiming that the virus had affected his brain. They forcibly prepared him for brain surgery. But driven by his desperate desire to save his daughter, Adu hijacked a staff member and stole a vehicle, finally escaping and heading towards his daughter's location. Meanwhile, Namju awoke in the pit. With the help of the homeless man, they fashioned makeshift incendiary devices and quickly made their way towards the original bridge. Back in the sewer, Xuanshu noticed that both she and the little boy were growing increasingly weak. Realizing they couldn't solely rely on rescue, they had to find a way to save themselves. She gathered all the usable pieces of clothing and tied them together to create a makeshift rope. With all her remaining strength, she managed to hook the clothing rope onto the metal grating above. However, to her despair, the rope was still significantly too short, and she couldn't reach it even when jumping. Just as Xuanshu was pondering what to do, an unexpected opportunity presented itself. The monster, having eaten its fill, came down to rest. To check if it was truly asleep, Xuanshu picked up an empty soda can and tossed it at the monster. The lack of any reaction gave Xuanshu a daring idea. She reassured the little boy, telling him to stay put and promising that she would return with help. Taking a running start, Xuanshu stepped onto the sleeping monster and managed to grab hold of the clothing rope. Just as she thought she had succeeded, the monster's tail wrapped around her, slowly lowering her back to the ground. It was as if the monster was taunting her, saying she would never escape as long as it was there. At that moment, the little boy emerged from the pipe and witnessed the scene, so terrified that he wet himself. To protect the boy, Xuanshu quickly pushed him back into the pipe. She desperately tried to run back towards it, but was caught by the monster. In a desperate attempt to eradicate the monster, the government initiated the deployment of a biochemical weapon into the Han River. This action sparked widespread discontent among the public, leading to large-scale protests nests along the riverbanks. Seeing such a large gathering of potential prey, the monster became even more agitated and swam towards the dense crowd. A protesting couple were the first to spot the approaching creature. Police officers began firing at the monster, but Adu frantically rushed forward, trying to stop them, fearing they might harm his daughter inside the monster's body. As the monster crawled onto the riverbank, the government decisively released the biochemical weapon. Seeing the monster writhing in agony on the ground, Adu ran towards it and finally found his daughter inside its stomach. He forcefully pulled her out and then noticed the little boy in her arms. Realizing that Juanshu was no longer alive, Adu cried out in anguish. Gradually, Adu regained his composure, his grief turning into a burning desire for revenge against the creature that had killed his daughter. Namil, holding a Molotov cocktail, ran towards the monster and threw it, but the creature dodged it. He continued his pursuit, but the monster evaded all his attempts. At that critical moment, the homeless man stepped forward. He quietly approached the monster from above and poured all the gasoline he had onto its body. Seizing the opportunity, Namil took out his last Molotov cocktail and aimed it at the monster. However, his hand slipped, and the Molotov cocktail fell behind him. Just as Namil was filled with frustration, an incredible moment occurred. The male protagonist, a skilled archer, dipped the tip of his arrow in flames, drew back his bow, and with perfect aim, struck the monster directly in the eye. Instantly, the monster's entire body was engulfed in flames. Its agonizing roars echoed through the air. The monster turned towards the nearby Han River, attempting to escape into the water to extinguish the fire. But just as it was about to reach the water's edge, Adu intercepted it. With all his might, Adu thrust a sharp object into the monster's vital spot. It was a father fighting for his deceased daughter. Finally, the exhausted monster collapsed. Adu, his body trembling, approached the little boy who had just regained consciousness. His daughter had sacrificed her life to protect this orphaned child. Perhaps it was fate's way of bringing them together. From that day forward, the boy lived with Adu, finding warmth and love in their makeshift family, living a simple yet happy life together.